Hello students, so in this video I'm going to go over questions 11 through 20 on the study guide. So if you're missing any question 11 through 20, I'm going to go through those one by one right now. I'm reading question 11 at the bottom of this page here. It says whales, which live in the water, have hips. These structures are important for carrying the weight of animals that walk on land. So it's an important thing to know. Why do we need hips? Because they help carry the weight of animals walking on land. What is this animal we're talking about? Oh yeah, whales. And we know that they live in the water. They do not walk on the land. So what information would this tell us about whales and their evolutionary history? Okay, so I want you to remember this is a certain type of structure. A lot of organisms that have evolved from other ones over time, they have these structures inside of them, or these structures that do not do anything. Whales do not need hips. They don't walk on the land. They don't need to carry their weight. However, they have them. So what does that mean that they have these structures that they don't use? So you learn some words about different structures. We learned about homologous structures and analogous structures. But this is a structure that an organism does not use. You should remember this is called a vestigial structure. It is a structure that an organism has that has lost its function. It doesn't do anything for the animal anymore. So why would an animal have a vestigial structure? This tells us that the organism, or the whale in this example, must have evolved from an organism that needed the hips. It must have evolved from an organism that used hips to walk on the land. It must have evolved from an organism that needed hips to walk on land. And so we know the whale evolved from some organisms similar to the common hippo that we have today. Okay, let's move on to question 12. Question 12 at the top says, this table shows characteristics of structures of several related groups of plants. So I'm just going to go through this table step by step before we read the question. We have the transport system, we have seeds, and we have leaves. These are all different structures on a plant. And then on the left column, we have the different groups of plants here. So we're trying to see what would maybe show that they're related to each other. Question 12 reads, all of these plants are related in their evolutionary history to a common ancestor that had what characteristic? So we're going to look at the chart or look at the table and try to find something that they all have in common. What is one structure that they all share to show that they have an evolutionary history? So all the plants that have what characteristic? We're going to try to find what's called a homologous structure, something that they all share. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back through my table here and look at it. The transport system starts. They all have a xylem and a phloem. For the seeds, these three all are covered, but the conifers are not. And for the leaves, we have a couple differences. On the leaves, we can see that some of the animals, or the plants, have no leaves. Some of them have branching veins That means their veins kind of branch out like this and make little branches in the veins. And some of them have parallel veins on their leaves, like that. So which of these structures is common? Well, look at it one more time, and we highlighted it. The transport system, right? This is something that they all share. Is shared. So they all must be related to a common ancestor that developed the xylem and the phloem first. This is something they all share. This shows that they have a common ancestor. Let's look at question 13. A certain genetic mutation, so we learn what a mutation is. This is a change in the DNA, is found with a high frequency. That means a lot of people have it. In populations of humans living in a place that experienced a deadly disease in the past. The same mutation is rare. It's the opposite of high frequency, rare, right? In places that have no history of the disease. Based on how genes work, what data would best support this claim? So this question is asking, we have a group of humans, and of this group of humans, I'm going to just put some dots in here. All of these humans have some mutation to protect them from a disease. There's only a couple people that don't have the protection in this group. We have another group of humans, and most of these people do not have the mutation. Only a handful of them do. It's very rare. And the only difference is the one on the left experienced the disease. So this has the mutation, and they experience disease. So why would this mutation be so prevalent? Why would it have such a high frequency? Why would this one have such a high frequency in this population? Based on how genes work. So the group on the left, the group with the mutation, has more because why would they have more of that mutation? Let's remember they experienced a disease in the past, and this disease would wipe out anyone who did not have the mutation. So what we learned about with evolution is there's always some sort of pressure, like a predator eating something. And we learned what would happen with the population of moths. If you eat all the light moths, we're left with dark moths. It's the same example here, only now instead of a moth eating the people, it's a virus or a disease. And so if we eat away, or if all of the people die that don't have the mutation, over time, you would get a group of people, you would have a population that all has it. They're all survived this deadly disease in the past, and now so they all have this mutation. Because the ones without the mutation died. Okay, so I know I didn't do a good job explaining that one, at least writing it out, but I want you to kind of think about that in your own words and try to explain that to me, what's kind of happening here. Again, it's the same idea as the peppered moth, only now it's diseases instead, and it's still the same thing. We're just mutating our genes, and there's a pressure. Something is killing off one group that don't have it. All right, let's look at question 14 and 15. These are very similar, so I'm just going to answer one of them, and that should help you answer the second one. So In order for natural selection to produce the long necks of the giraffe, so there's my giraffe right there, it's got a long neck. What must have been true about the history of giraffes? Well, we know that the long neck is something important for these animals. They need the neck so they can eat leaves that are up high in the African trees. But why would they grow longer over time? So we've learned that this long neck must be, first of all, number one, it must be an advantage. The long neck must be an advantage. That's the first step for evolution. It has to be a good trait. We're only going to continue to pass on genes that are helpful or beneficial to us. But again, why would the necks get longer over time? There was a word that we learned in science early on with evolution to describe differences between giraffes. When a giraffe has babies, all of the babies from that giraffe do not have the exact same length of neck. There's going to be some differences in how long their necks are. Some might be long necks, some might be shorter necks. And if we don't have those differences, the necks would never get longer. If a giraffe always had the same length every time when they're born, their neck would never get longer over time. But because some babies are born with longer necks and some are born with shorter necks, terrible dry, we have what's called a variation. We have differences in traits. So variations of traits leads to natural selection. So that's what's important, is that the giraffes all have different lengths of necks so that there is an advantage. The long neck is only an advantage if they have those differences. Otherwise, the long neck doesn't have an advantage over the same length neck. They're equal. There's no advantage anymore. There has to be differences so one group outcompetes, and then you have evolution happening over time. Question 15 is a very similar question. I'm just going to write out an idea here and let you finish it up. Some plants have developed thick, waxy coatings that prevent the loss of water over their leaves. So their leaves, I'm going to draw just a leaf here, may have some sort of a waxy coating that covers the outside of the leaf, and it protects the leaf from losing water. How could a plant develop a thick, waxy coating? How could it make this coating even thicker over time and make it even better at preventing the loss of water? What needs to happen? All right, I want you to try to explain that to me using the same example as the giraffe example. Why would it change over time? And what must be true about this waxy coating? Okay, and I'm going to highlight what I said about the giraffe example and see if that points out to you. So the first thing we said about the giraffe is it must have been an advantage, must have been helpful for the giraffe. So this waxy coating probably needs to be an advantage. And then the same thing, we had to have variation with the giraffe. We probably need the same thing with this leaf here as well to have natural selection. Okay, moving on to question 16. This illustration provides information on 4 variations in the size and shape of antlers in a population of moose. So we know that moose grow antlers, and they're not all identical. There's going to be differences in size and shape. That's what a variation is. There's differences. Question 16 says, In order to grow antlers, a male moose must expend a great amount of energy it gets from its food. So that means that it's going to use a lot of its energy to grow these antlers. In an environment where food resources are limited, so in this environment where this moose lives, it does not have a lot of food. Where would be an increase of which kind of antlers? So you have to look at this chart here and try to identify A, B, C, or D. Which antlers would be likely to grow when there's not a lot of food available? The antlers that would grow when food is scarce. So A, B, C, or D, or B, because, so we're going to try to grow antlers that don't take a lot of energy. That's our because, that's what we're looking for. They do not need much energy. So now can you look at the table and try to identify which of these different moose antlers would be the ones that we would grow, which ones would require the less energy. Look at the top, there's something here at the top. We have the weight, the width, the size. We're going to try to find the ones that need the less energy. So you should be able to look at that chart and figure that out and try to find those types of antlers. Question 17. I need you to go.
No.
Okay. So let's look at question 17 at the bottom. We have, it says, students are modeling how genes produce proteins. So remember that we have our DNA, they produce our proteins in our body. And they're using wooden tiles with letters to represent the genes. Remember, we learned that our genes are a code. So we can use letters to kind of represent the code. In this model, the word contains a combination of letters to produce proteins. So we have genes on the left. These are our DNA, and they will code for your proteins. So this DOVE code will create the word dove. That's our word that we're going to make. In the model, can you tell me what would need to take place to describe a mutation? What needs to take place to describe a mutation? So a mutation is a change in the code. All right, so can you tell me there's 4 really ways we can change this code. I'm going to show you some examples and let you kind of figure the rest out. So instead of making the word dove, maybe I can make, there's 4 different words I could make. There's an infinite number of words I can make, but I could change the word and make the word dive. I could change the word and make the word Dover. I could change the word dove and make it oved. I could do that. Or I could just do this, D-O-V. Maybe I have that. So there's 4 possibilities for really how I can change my wooden tiles over there on the left and create a different protein. There's 4 ways that your genes could be mutated is what I'm trying to say. And I'll point out the first 2 and let you figure out the second 2 here. So the first thing I did, I changed this O to an I. Sometimes the code gets substituted. I could substitute letters. That's the first thing I could change about my code. Maybe I change the O to an I or the D to a G, and I could change the letters, literally substituting them. The second thing you saw that I did, to create the word Dover, I could add letters. So given that, can you figure out what I did to create the word oved over there? I did something different with them. And then to create the word DOV at the bottom, I did something else with those little letters. So can you figure out there's kind of two other ways I can mutate those genes? Moving on to the next question. Question 18. The table displays data about the presence of certain traits in a population of chickens. I want you to look at this chart here. There are 3 generations of chickens that we're looking at. There's generation 5, 10. So it's going 1 to 5 to 10. What does that mean, generation 5 and 10? That means it is generation 1's babies, 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 babies. It is their great, 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 great grandchildren is what that is when I say generation 5. The data provides evidence that best supports the claim that these chickens are being bred for what characteristic? So I have 4 characteristics here: feather color, weight, beak length, and number of tail feathers. Which of these is changing the most? What is changing over time about these birds? Is there any pattern that you see, and tell me which trait do you think they are being bred for? There's one trait that stands out above the other ones. I'll let you figure that one out. Number 19, we learned about mutations. So we learned that there are beneficial mutations. And they help with survival. Then you have harmful mutations, and they do just that. They harm survival, make it harder to survive. And then finally, we have neutral mutations, and these do nothing for survival. What I want you to still do for me on this question is, can you find an example of each? Could you figure out an example of a beneficial, a harmful, and a neutral? I know we had trouble for neutral in class, so an example that I gave were the earlobes on humans, because we don't use earlobes to survive, but we have differences. Some of us have dangly earlobes, and some of us have attached earlobes. And then finally, question 20. Question 20 here. Can you tell me why the table is changing in this way? We have a peppered moth. In 1965, the majority of them are dark. You can see that here, 88% of the population is dark. But by 1985, only 23% of them now are dark. So I think the peppered moth changed to become more light colored because they were what? What is the reason why the light color is changing over time? Remember when we did our investigation, it had to do something with predators. So can you tell me why that is happening there? Can you see that in the table and explain it? All right, I'm going to stop here with the video. Good luck on your test. Use your study guides. You guys got this.